Welcome everyone to the Danos Group's DE&I webinar, the Black History Month edition. We're pleased to have you all on the call. Thank you so much for joining and thank you so much to our speakers. My name is Maame. I lead the EMEA legal practice here and I co-head the DE&I committee. And I'm also joined here by Isabel, who is our compliance lead for Europe and also co-heads the DE&I committee with me. Before I start, I'll give you a quick introduction into the Danos Group. We are a global legal risk and compliance headhunting firm specializing in the financial services sector. And we've grown since our setup in 2004 with offices now in London, New York, Hong Kong, and Singapore. Before we get started today, I'd like to go over some housekeeping questions. So just before we start, can you please all mute yourselves so that there's no background noise or interference? And also we will be recording this session, so please bear that in mind. We've got today 3 experienced panelists who are going to be reflecting on their experiences as diverse professionals in the financial services sector. And they'll also be giving us some tips on how to attract, promote, and retain diverse talent.
Thank you, Maame, and welcome all. So yes, let's jump straight into it. Our first speaker is the Global Head of Thematic Risk IGC Compliance at Citibank. She is passionate about promoting diversity. She's also a motivational speaker and coach and multi-award-winning financial service professional who has been recognized by the likes of the Financial Times, Yahoo Finance, the Global Thinkers Forum, the Telegraph, and Women in Banking and Finance, just to name a few. So please join me in welcoming Abisola Barber. Over to you, Abisola.
What is positive discrimination? How does that differ from positive action? Why should I be caring about this? And why is this actually something that companies should be thinking of? Now, let's start with the former, positive discrimination. And that is actually an unlawful practice. And the real definition of positive discrimination, and the idea behind it really is that preferential treatment of a person based on what is identified as a protective characteristic. Now, these protective characteristics may come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. It could be based on your race or your ethnicity. It could actually be based on your age. It could be based on your gender or your sexual orientation or your preferences. It can be based on your disability. So that's just a small list. There is obviously a much longer list and various different types of diverse lenses and characteristics that people have to which you could unfortunately be discriminated against. And that's the reason why it's unlawful. Now, legislation varies depending on which part in the world that you live in or work in. Particularly in the UK, this was highlighted in the, I believe, 2010 Equality Act. In the US, there are a number of affirmative action laws that exist, different sort of titles within a number of elements of the US Constitution and the Civil Rights Act. And in the EU, there are 2 key directives actually that highlight and talk about discrimination in the workplace. And naturally over in the Asia Pacific and in Africa and broadly across the world, this is addressed and targeted in a number of different pieces of legislation. And the idea here is to ensure that each person in the workforce, each person in the country, regardless of where they are, who they are, what they're doing, does not face discrimination, and to make sure that we have equality in some form. And so naturally you can start to understand why positive discrimination and discrimination really in its truest is an unlawful practice. So that's the positive discrimination side. And the positive action side really is actually the positive benefits, the side and the notion of how do you then improve, especially where there's been underrepresentation of a minority group, possibly based on ethnicity, possibly based on gender, and how do you improve that representation, but basing it on their qualifications. And so that's why actually I'm a champion for positive action. I've been involved in a number of diversity groups at the different firms I've worked in, but both internally and externally, and something that I truly champion. And so why should we be thinking of and pursuing positive action? And if, as an employer and both and as an employee, we have different steps that we can each take. Now, as an employer, I would recommend, looking at actually addressing the root cause of why you may have that underrepresentation, because it's all well and good trying to instill some form of positive action. So, for example, increasing the representation of your Black colleagues in the bank or in the financial services firm, or in the recruitment or consultancy firm that you operate in, and you can improve that representation. But if you don't address the root cause as to why they are underrepresented, then you are not fixing the issue. You are simply sticking a plaster on it. You know, if you are not especially in line with UK Black History Month's statement line and theme for this year, action, not words. If you're not taking actual action on the words that you state and you're not really actually moving the needle, then things will not change. And also, if you're not reviewing the action that you are supposedly taking and ensuring that it's addressing the root cause and the goal that you're trying to get to, then again, there will not be any difference. And from a personal perspective or from an employee perspective, there are a few things that you can do to support positive action. I think one that I really do encourage is paying it forward. So especially if you come from or you identify necessarily as a person with a particular protected characteristic, may face some form of discrimination against, look for others who are like you. Pay it forward and support them, whether that's mentoring or supporting juniors who look like you, whether that's doing community outreach programs to really connect with others and bring them together. Really pay it forward and think about how you can support the next generation or others that are in your peer group or even those above you. The next item that I would quickly say just before I move on to my next colleague who's joining on the line is then also utilize your strengths. The idea behind positive action really to make sure that those with the qualifications and the abilities to do that role are the ones that are actually pushed forward and selected. So not just ticking the box to say you meet this criteria of being either a Black person or a woman or someone of a particular sexual orientation. You meet this criteria because you have the qualifications and the abilities to do that. So pick your strengths. Where you are strongest in, utilize that and actually work really hard to encourage and improve and strengthen your strengths so that you know that when you are being selected or proposed or put forward, you are going there of your own merit and of your own ability, and you can really, truly make a difference there. So I'll pause there and I'll definitely leave some space for questions, hopefully at the end, if anyone would like to engage further on this discussion topic. But back to Maame and Isabel.
Thank you so much, Abisola. That was super insightful, and it was an excellent breakdown of positive action versus positive discrimination. And yes, thank you so much, Abisola, for mentioning that. If you have any questions for our speakers, can you please use the live chat section in Zoom, or equally, if you can send it to me or Isabel, we're more than happy to put the questions to the speakers. So that kind of leads me on to the next part, which is introducing our second speaker, Suyi. And Suyi is the head of corporate development, and he's also the general counsel for Anchebe Group, which is an African power company. And before joining Anchebe, Suyi worked as an international transactional lawyer with Slaughter and May, Linklaters and Dentons. He is also the chief of staff for Anchebe and is incredibly passionate about promoting diversity. And in his personal time, he spends his time mentoring junior lawyers and people also coming up the ranks. So Suyi, over to you.
Thanks, Maame. Hi all, thanks for making the time. I'll just give a quick overview of my background. As Maame said, I come from a legal background. Increasingly, I do a lot more on the commercial side and corporate executive side. A few reflections on my experience as a male, Black, African, Nigerian lawyer in city law firms. I think what one gets quite early on is the realization that there are only few people in the room, and these are not very diverse organizations. I think when I started my training contracts in 2010, and it's increasingly more diverse now. I'm the sort of person that sort of takes the advantage in any situation. So I thought, okay, it's not very diverse, but I'm going to focus on the training and not focus too much on, I wish there was more diversity. So that was my view when I was a junior lawyer. But increasingly, as I became more senior, I could see the correlation between how having a diverse background and having mentors and people who look like you in a position of seniority in the organizations you work for does actually have a tangible benefit. And whilst some of my moves were not solely due to seeking more diversity, It's, I would say, coincidental, but in part attributed to the fact that I consistently wanted to work for companies and organizations that had an affiliation with Africa. As I said earlier, I'm Nigerian. I grew up in Nigeria. I have a fairly good network in Nigeria, and I took the decision to increasingly seek to do more deals and transactions in on the continent, and that is a double-edged sword, I would say, as a junior lawyer, because when you put your head up and say, "I want to do Africa deals," that could pigeonhole you on the one hand. On the other hand, people might just say, "Well, you do whatever you're given." So if where I am now, if I reflect back on some of the things law firms can do, one, to attract, retain, and promote professionals, lawyers, bankers, management consultants into positions of seniority, one, I would say, looking at the work allocation, because in the world of professional services, you're only as good as the deals, the transactions, the projects you work on, and making sure that work allocation is as fair as possible. And you have an even spread. This applies to race, this applies to gender, this applies to sexual orientation, but making sure that the work allocation is as transparent and as fair as possible. Two, even before getting to that stage, I think professional services and companies need to look at their outreach programs. It's all well and good, the magic circle where I trained to go to Oxford, Cambridge, the Oxbridge universities, and the LSEs and red brick institutions. But if you want to get even more diversity and a wider pool, having an outreach program that reaches other universities and people from maybe different socioeconomic backgrounds as well as race. So I think the outreach program hopefully will help to get a more diverse pool of talent in. When you have a diverse bench, ensuring the work allocation treats everyone fairly based on their competence, and no one is disadvantaged because they come from a certain race and maybe cannot relate to certain cultural experiences. I think unconscious bias training is very important, just making sure people are not indirectly discriminating against others as a result of their lack of awareness or ignorance, to put it bluntly. I think that also helps. But I think one of the more important points is also ensuring that professional services companies have people of diverse backgrounds in positions of seniority, because there's a lot to be said for that ability to see someone that looks like you or comes from a similar background in a position of seniority through merit. So I'm not talking about token representation, I'm talking about genuine effort to make sure that people who are good enough are given the opportunities. And we all need gatekeepers. I mean, we can all relate to this. Either we are gatekeepers to other people or people have been gatekeepers to us. I think trying to have a wider pool of candidates, giving the right training, providing mentors, providing the right work culture, not just Black History Month, but providing the right culture, embracing diversity, breaking out of groupthink. I think those are things that will make a tangible impact. I will acknowledge that some professional services are starting to do this, but I think more work needs to be done. And the final point I would highlight as a corporate executive and general counsel at Anchebe, which, as Maame said, is an African company, is that you are seeing a shift or a broadening in the characteristics of corporate executives, board members, the composition of the C-suite. You've had the Parker Review, which is trying to create better, more ethnic diversity in boards of listed companies. This is also happening in the private sector as well. And so when you have greater diversity in boardrooms and C-suites, you will find And I can use myself as an example that for me, when I'm picking advisors, whether it's on the financial advisory side or on the legal advisory side, diversity is a soft but very critical point to the composition of my advisory team, because I knew from my experience that I wasn't quite happy with the level of diversity that existed. So your professional services are going to have a similar downward pressure to make sure that there is greater diversity, because professional services respond to the clients, and within the clients, you're seeing a shift in the makeup of the C-suite. So if not for altruistic reasons, if not for making sure that the employees are happy and are well primed to thrive within the companies, it's very important for the bottom line, because I sent out an RFP today to legal advisors, and one of the elements, not just show me your experience and your team biography. I said I'd also like to see a diverse bench that you propose for this transaction. So it is tangible, it is real. You are seeing a great pressure to have diverse teams on transactions from clients. And furthermore, the nature of clients are slightly shifting as well, or maybe fundamentally shifting as we have global macroeconomic changes. You're seeing a push to new emerging markets for source of growth, for source of profitability. So you are seeing, for example, African companies, Latin American companies become bigger, acquiring what you would call typically established market companies. You're seeing African companies being listed on the FTSE 350, on the New York Stock Exchange. These are becoming these companies are predominantly predominantly employ black professionals. They are becoming clients in their own rights, and they would expect that the makeup of their advisors, at the very least, reflects the same level of diversity that they would like to see within their own organization. So I think it's one that there are different pressure points that professional services need to take into consideration, and I'll say the last 5 years it was a case that it was a nice thing to do, but I think in the times we're in, and as things continue to develop, it goes directly to the bottom line, profitability and attractiveness of professional services. So those are my reflections on the topic.
Thank you very much, that was very insightful. And what you mentioned about maybe firms looking outside of Russell Group universities, and to kind of open up that diversity, something a number of firms have started looking at, and also about having diverse leaders, and that's creating role models as well. This is again something that we always talk about. So no, thank you very much. Our last speaker is Tracey Abayeta, who is the Senior Vice President HR, responsible for inclusion, diversity, equity, and allyship and talent development at Lazard. Now, before I hand it over to Tracey, I do want to say that Tracey actually helped me when I was in university as a Black female who was trying to find her way into finance. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I wasn't sure if finance was for me. But Tracey used to work at SEO. And SEO London is a UK registered charity known for delivering superior educational training and mentoring and support to young people from underrepresented and underdeserved backgrounds. And at the time, Tracey was the head of investment banking there and asset management and her capital program at SEO London. And she organized, honestly, amazing initiatives that were all about supporting and giving us a lot of knowledge into finance. And through that, I was actually able to get my spring internship at JP Morgan. And a number of my friends were able to actually, till today, currently work in investment banking. So it's great to have you, Tracey, and over to you.
Thank you, Isabel. Thank you for that kind introduction, and it's great to be here. So yeah, really interesting discussion. When Isabel reached out to me and mentioned about this event for Black History Month, and that the focus was recruitment agencies, talent acquisition, I thought, what could I speak about that could add a lot of value to this discussion around DEI during Black History Month? And I'll, Isabel shared a bit about my background, but I will kind of just go kind of give you the overall picture, and then kind of get into the topic that I'll be talking about today. So I work at Lazard, and my focus is, equivalent, people call it diversity and inclusion. We call it IDEA, so inclusion, diversity, equity, and allyship. And I also look at talent development. And I actually think that those two areas need to be aligned. So I always tell people that actually what I'm essentially really interested in is helping organizations get the most out of their people in the workplace. And I appreciate that as organizations become increasingly more diverse, actually people's backgrounds, experiences will play a part in how people are able to navigate the world of work. So we kind of have to look at both of these things. And the way I look at it, I see that it's a two-pronged approach. So the first one is, how do you come alongside the organization, which many times are the leaders, the teams, so that they are intentional about creating an environment where anybody, irrespective of their background, can thrive in their organization. And then the second thing, which is probably feeds into my experience from SEO London, is how do you come alongside the people? So people that are in the world of work, that aren't able to, maybe have been quite underexposed in the industry. They may not have kind of many people, many connections. And actually, how do you help them to navigate the world of work? Because you will find that probably many people from, let's say ethnic minority backgrounds, kind of maybe grew up with the premise that if you work hard, get your head down, get good grades, you will be successful. And then they go into the world of work and they realize that doesn't translate into promotions. It doesn't translate into kind of rising up through the corporate ladder, and you get people just stuck at middle management. So how do you actually help them become more strategic with their career, become more visible? So actually, whilst I was working at SEO London, that was the role that I did before I came to Lazard, is that I realized we were doing so much work in getting people through the doors of many bulge bracket organizations, asset management firms, but actually what happened to them once they got into the organization. And I guess kind of you could call SEO London, kind of a diversity recruitment agency ultimately, but we probably did a lot more kind of developing of kind of students along the way. But ultimately, it's not just about bums on seats. And for many recruitment agencies, yes, you are measured by that, being able to find the right candidate, get them in the door. But what happens after that? And what I want to talk to you about today is actually how can our recruitment agencies, together with the talent acquisition teams who sit in-house, how can they work together to push forward the diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda? So if we are saying, we've heard kind of from the previous speakers that actually the importance of representation and having role models, but you can't just promote somebody because, they are aligned to a certain area of diversity. Like, there needs to be something to show for it, which is why things like the work allocation is important. So you're giving people ammunition to be able to progress through the ranks. So these are kind of some of the things that I've been thinking about. And what I wanted to share with you today is actually, what does that look like at the talent acquisition recruitment level, which probably seems quite preliminary. So yes, you get people in and then maybe it's no longer kind of your responsibility, but what can you do? Because actually, if you think about the recruitment agencies, so for instance, Danos, you sit in the industry, but you have many clients. So you can almost be the eyes and ears of your industry. So, yes, you will place candidates, but actually, what's your relationship with those candidates that go on and do very, very well in those organizations? Are you, especially if they're from a diverse background, are you going back to engage them and find out what is it that has been the factors to your success? What has the organization that we've placed you at, what are they doing really, really well to support diverse talent? Because what you can do with that information is you can now take that to your other clients and actually add a lot of value to them. So they can now hear that, kind of this organization is doing X, Y, and Z. What does this look like for us? What does this look like for Lazard's compliance department? Like, what they're doing in X, Y, Z, how does this translate to what we're doing for us? So oftentimes, it's also important to think about when hires go wrong, like what was it about the environment that maybe wasn't quite right? So that, again, you can educate your client group and bring people together and use the information you're getting to add value to your clients. So I think that's really important. And when I was at SEO London, actually that was something that I would often do, because you don't, as an external consultant, you don't often have the power to take decisions within your clients that you serve, but you can advise them. So I think it's really important to think about, how are you sharing the information that you're collecting, and being very intentional about the types of questions you're even asking your candidates. So again, ask the questions, what are your firms doing? We've placed you at this firm. What have they done to integrate you? So it's not just about placement, it's about integration. So actually, when you think about talent acquisition, it should really probably be talent acquisition and integration, because there's no point in placing somebody and not giving people the tools they need to be successful in your organization. So again, at Lazard, in the role that I sit, I'm not in talent acquisition, but since I've been in the firm, I've been here about 3 years. And from the beginning, there has been a big push for diversity and inclusion. So when it comes to hiring, we're always thinking, do we have diverse slates? Who else are we interviewing? But then slowly the conversation started being, but actually, what's our integration strategy? We're bringing in all this diverse talent. When we were very homogenous, maybe we didn't have to be intentional about this. Maybe we didn't have to think about, actually, are people getting the right information they need to succeed? But now that we are bringing in people that are very different, if we want to get the best value out of all of these people that are coming into our organization, and because, like she said, we are a financial advisory firm, all we produce is ideas. So actually, from a business perspective, we should be getting better quality of ideas if we're having different perspectives, looking at complex problems for our clients. But if those people are not empowered to kind of do their best work, then we're not going to benefit from that diversity. So I started asking people, what is our integration strategy? Making sure that actually working together with our talent acquisition team and the teams that were welcoming these new joiners, how are you setting this person up for success? What do they need to know in their first month? How are you helping them build their internal relationships? How are you leveraging your employee networks to be business resource groups so that they can actually help people integrate into your firm? So these are some of the questions that talent acquisition firms need to actually start thinking about, talent acquisition teams need to start thinking about, and you can leverage your partners who are recruitment agencies to find out what are other people doing and trying to see, is there an opportunity for you to put something in place? So what I wanted to do is just kind of share with you some of the things that we have been doing with our new joiners. And again, for some on the call, it could be that actually you think, could this work at our firm? Is this something that actually, as we think about, we're bringing people in, we don't want to create a revolving door system, because you hear it all the time. People get brought in, you spend a lot of money recruiting, interviewing, it's time, it's money. So if 3 months down the line, you've now made the conclusion, this isn't going to work out, or this was a bad hire, and if there's a consistent pattern that it's, if you're a woman or an ethnic minority, that conversation tends to be happening at a higher proportion, then we really need to ask ourselves and say, are we creating the right environment that everybody can thrive? So here are some of the things that we've done at Lazard, for instance. So really mobilizing our employee network. So before people, once they resign and they let us know that they're coming, we are already thinking about how can we connect our new joiners to the networks before they arrive. So we let them know, these are all the networks we have. If you want to talk to any of them, let us know. So there are many people that I've spoken to them as the person that's head of D&I before they even get here, giving them an insight to the community that is in our organizations. And for for some people, they might think this isn't really a big deal, but actually when you're going into an organization where you are the only one, this is a small act but can be a very big deal. And I'll give you just a short story. When I went to the University of Nottingham, I remember going there, and on my first day sitting in the house of residence and not seeing anybody that looks like me. And I remember thinking, I cannot spend 4 years in this university with no one that looks like me. And I remember, I think it was day 3 that I met another Black young lady, and I remember just connecting with somebody, being able to ask questions like, where are we going to do our hair? Where are we going to get our eyebrows set? Where can we get our food? Like, she wasn't even doing the same course, but because there was just somebody that could relate to me, connect to me, I was then had the piece that actually I can stay here for 3 years, for 4 years. So in the same way, when people go into the world of work, you really want to accelerate that sense of belonging so that they can produce their best work. So definitely mobilize your employee networks. The second one, new joiner breakfast. When people come in as lateral hires, they may not have the benefit of, the graduate program, the relationships that they've built, they've left where they were and they've taken a risk to come to your organization. What are you doing to help them being able to build their relationships within your organization? And then the third thing that I think is really exciting that we've done this year is actually the introduction of integration plans. So when we know that teams are welcoming new joiners to their team, we're actually putting a plan in place. What happens in week 1 for this individual? And I'm not talking about onboarding, because onboarding is like at the institutional level, you know, HR are doing a whole load of stuff. But from a team's perspective, somebody that is leaving where they are to come to your team, it's not the same environment. What do they need to succeed in your team? What do they need to know so that you give them the best start? Because it's so much more harder to get people to raise their motivation when they're underperforming, or, you know, kind of, you know, they haven't put their best foot forward. So it's really important that talent acquisition teams, you are putting the onus on your internal team to prepare for the new joiners so that they can have the best start. So those are kind of a few things that have been done. I know that time is not on our side, but I'm happy to answer any questions that people may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tracey. That was incredible. And certainly for myself, I've taken a lot of tips. You know, when you talked about the diversity of thought, looking at integration strategies and a number of things. So thank you so much for that. And I'm sure we have lots of questions.
Yeah, we do.
I'm gonna have to pick this one. I'll go for Isioma first. Hi, Isioma. So her question is, what type of obstacles have the speakers faced during their careers and how did they overcome them? And I think I'll throw this question to you, Abisola, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Thank you for your question. It's interesting, as I was reflecting over the question as I saw it in the chat function, it actually occurred to me that the obstacles that I faced in the workplace have often been repeated obstacles that I faced throughout life and in the world. And a prime example of that, as I mentioned, as I was speaking earlier, growing up where I did, we were, you know, pretty much the only Black family in the entire area. By the time it got to my sort of generation in my family, there might have been one or two others, but also going to sort of further education, my universities, in both instances, I was one of very few Black people. And then kind of, I say, growing up from a work perspective on the trading floor, there were very few and far between people that looked like me, whether that was Black people or women. And so I found that as you know, like I say, a replica of an obstacle that I'd faced before. But I think the fortunate thing that I had was, because I'd faced that similar obstacle before, I'd developed opportunities or methods to deal with, to cope with, or to overturn that. And so whether that was a case of, you know, potentially feeling isolated or not feeling like you had the appropriate support around you. I think Tracey really covered this well when she was talking about her joining at the University of Nottingham, finding someone that has a shared experience. They don't necessarily need to be on the exact same course or the exact same path. But for me, it was identifying someone that, you know, had some form of similarity, even if they weren't necessarily, be it on my trading floor or in any of the programs or courses that I was on, but someone that I could soundboard with and really actually be able to just share either that isolation or, am I thinking this correctly? Is this the right perspective to have? And so having that, I guess, companion and confidant in that manner has really helped me in a number of ways. But also, actually, if you think about broader programs and structures, and I do think there's a question, hopefully we get to talk about this later, on mentoring, but also on coaching and sponsoring and the benefits that they can bring. For me in particular, especially as I even moved companies, having a mentor and having a guide who can really help me as a lateral hire, but also as a sort of mid-career hire or senior career hire, has been so beneficial for me to overcome obstacles of, I'm looking different to everyone else, I'm sounding different to everyone else, I have a different set of experiences to everyone else. And even in my current example, my background has always been in markets, and from a sort of trading perspective, I then moved into a more senior role in compliance. And so even just that difference of understanding of the institution and the business and the function that you're in, again, those are similar obstacles, not just from a race perspective or an ethnicity perspective, but everyone faces different obstacles, and the way that you overcome them, I believe, is sort of a true testament to your character, so your ability to learn from them and to move forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Abisola. Isabel, do you want to take the next question?
Yes, so this question's from Sasha, so thank you very much, Sasha. And we want to ask Sue this question. So any views on reverse mentoring? I've heard many mixed reviews. It can be exhausting for mentees, fear of career limiting views. Sue, over to you.
I was hoping you were going to ask me the one about the general counsel, but no, I think reverse mentoring, I think that is useful. I think it's down to the level of the commitment of both the mentor and the mentee. I think it would also help in this case, the mentor to build confidence, because it takes a lot of confidence to look at your boss or someone very senior and say, I think you need to do this better. I think it also requires humility on the part of the mentee, he or she has, significantly more experience and more stature within the organization. So I think it can only be beneficial for both parties involved, provided that there's the requisite amount of humility and transparency and confidence to express your views.
Can I just talk about reverse mentoring, because I'm actually doing reverse mentoring, and we've launched a program at Lazard as well. So actually, reverse mentoring can be very, very powerful if you have leaders that are willing to engage, because what it's supposed to do is increase awareness of the lived experience of someone. And the way we structured it is that, it was more junior people in our organization, and they were kind of representatives from each of our different employee networks, but we put them with people that were not kind of in their team. So they didn't really have kind of much interaction with them, which meant that hopefully would get, pave the way for really authentic conversations. And I think, we talk about like learning and development, and sometimes, learning doesn't always happen in the classroom. Learning happens on the desk, but actually this is a great way for leaders to learn through building a personal relationship with someone that has a lived experience. And it's an extremely powerful tool. I'm reverse mentoring somebody, and actually I would say that he is an exemplary leader, and I don't doubt that actually he's going to be an even better leader because of the work that he's putting into this program. So he often comes to me and says, look, I've got this situation, I need to give feedback. He had just recruited a woman onto his team, the first woman, and he was saying, look, I know that she's probably going to have some challenges, like how can I navigate these conversations? And he's just found our relationship as a safe space for him to be very, very honest about the things that he's scared about talking about and how to approach certain things. So it really does require people to be willing to commit to the process. And I'll put a link into the chat just on a video about the reverse mentoring program that Virgin Atlantic did, because I think it's a good summary of how it can be really powerful and transformative for an organization.
Thank you very much, Sue and Tracey.
Yeah, so Sue, coming back to you, and we were
always going to ask you this
question for you. So the question is, so what role does sorry, I think we've lost the question. There we go. So what role are GC/the C-suite playing or should play as D&I change agents when it comes to choosing outside counsel? Should they ask who will get staffed and legal matters they prefer, or who will get the origination/client relationship management credit?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and it depends. I think what general counsels typically do is they want to see great diversity, but at the end of the day, you want to have the experience and you want to have the credibility. So this is not, a conversation around just staff my deal with, just Black people, and the most junior person is a Black person, and then that means this is not favoritism, So what we want is a diverse team, but you don't want reverse discrimination. We're just talking about reverse mentorship. We don't want reverse discrimination either. So to the extent that there is a diverse team and the relationship partner is a proven expert with lots of experience in industry, then that is fine. If there is someone who is equally competent and comes from a diverse background, whether that's race, that's gender, that's disability, you want to see that person being put in front of the client, irrespective of what the background of the client is. So I think it's completely dependent, but the idea is just to make sure that you don't wheel out one team for the CVs and then you wheel out your default team for the transaction. So the general counsels want to make sure that there isn't a gaming of the system or some form of arbitrage. And it's not a tick box exercise. It's actually because the professional service firms realize that actually we are better off if we have diverse thought, people from different backgrounds, because people from different backgrounds are likely to have that also cultural understanding when it comes to interacting with the clients, or even geographical awareness of where the investment is or where the capital is going into, and whatever the scenario is.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sue. That's really good. And thank you so much for breaking it down for us. I've picked up another question. We've got quite a few questions. I don't think we'll be able to go through all of them today, but what we'll do is we'll forward them on to the speakers. One of the questions is, what effect do the panel think remote working will have on DE&I initiatives with a particular focus on integration? I think I'm personally quite interested in finding out the answer, because with remote working, everyone's away. Well, not everyone's away, but you have different people coming into the office at different times. So how do you integrate when not everyone is together at the same time? So I think I'd like to keep this one free, and then whoever wants to answer can put their hand up and do it. Abisola, Tracey, and Sue.
I'm happy to contribute, but I also would like to hear Tracey's thoughts on this. I think in particular, she mentioned integration and the importance of integration when you think about talent acquisition and, really supporting colleagues that work in the organisation. But I think from my...
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Worries. But I think from my perspective first, remote working, it's one of those double-edged swords, right? It can be both a blessing and a curse in some instances. If you don't have an engaged workforce or in a workforce that doesn't feel supported whilst they're remotely working, then you're losing the benefits of it. It should really support and allow for the fluidity and the flexibility of employees and employers to, make sure people can grow in the right instances, but also have the appropriate work-life balance that I think we lacked so much before the pandemic. And so really allowing that to flourish. And so if you are appropriately engaging and not sort of over supervising or over policing and patrolling your employees when they are remotely working, but providing them with that safe space, both physically and also psychologically, actually, when it comes to remote working. If you have the right infrastructure in place to allow them to, work appropriately from home, to network appropriately from home, to have, allocated time, if that's what you need to do, to ensure that they're connecting with other colleagues or with other networks, be it diversity or sporting or otherwise. If you have the right setup and the right framework in place to foster and really engender a collaborative space, regardless of whether you're in the office or not, but also if you then support that and entrench that with an in-person framework that also continues that. So it doesn't then matter whether you're in the office or at home or wherever else you're remote working, you have that constant support, you have that constant and sort of enriched framework that allows for it. Then I think that, remote working can actually benefit from that. And I think all too often, sometimes we've almost felt chained to the desk, so to speak. And so you don't even get a moment to either, breathe or take a 10-minute coffee break or be able to go on that chat or that walk with someone that you want to do. The ability to remote work means that you do have a little bit more freedom there. So you could take a call, for example. I did this many times during pandemic. I went for a walk and put my headphones on and was taking calls whilst I was walking, which I wouldn't have had the time to do that or the chance to do that if I was working on the trading floor. But you can really actually maximize a number of different outcomes and outputs if you have the right support. So I do think remote working can definitely benefit and can definitely support networking and growth, personal development, but you need to have the right support and the right overall framework that sits around everything. But Tracey, I'd love to pass to you from an integration perspective as well.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to the hybrid world, I think it's really forced us to just be more intentional. So I think, when we were in the office, there were probably things that were happening naturally that they won't be happening in a virtual world. So you just actually have to be more intentional about that. And I'll give you an example. So Lazard is a financial advisory firm, and one of the things that, you know, they pride themselves on is this sense of an apprenticeship culture, you know, kind of banking. You have somebody you can look over the shoulder, you can do a model together. Like, there's all these things that happen naturally when we're in person, which is true. But now that we're in a hybrid world, you're not going to get everybody in the office at the same time. You have people in different teams that, you know, when you were sitting together all the time, your paths would have crossed, and that just doesn't happen anymore organically. So it's just about actually, how do you build intentionality into the system? So for instance, one of the levels that we hire a lot is like lateral hire analysts, third-year analysts, second-year analysts. They come into the organization, they haven't done the graduate program, but how do we integrate them? So earlier this year, we actually launched a peer mentoring a peer coaching program, which brought together all of our analysts as a peer group. Naturally, they wouldn't, because they're all in on different days, you know, kind of with COVID, people just don't see each other anymore. But we brought them together, and we were going through kind of training topics that would be really relevant for them, that if they went back to their desk, actually they would be adding value. So trying to host things that bring together people for a purpose, and that allowed them to connect with more senior bankers, but just being more intentional in that approach was a solution to the challenge. We were hearing that, oh, you know, the hybrid world has broken our apprenticeship model. People need to be in the office, because if not, they're not going to learn. It's like, no, they can still learn, but let's just be more purposeful. So for instance, even when we talk about navigating the world of work, somebody may ask the question about mentoring programs. They're good, but again, you have to be intentional. What are you trying to mentor people about? Are you explaining them to them actually, what does visibility mean in the workplace? Like, how can you be successful at Lazard? Because it's not the same way you're going to be successful at Goldman Sachs, but we just don't have this level of intentionality. And for some, you know, it will happen organically because their dad runs a team, their dad is a CEO, their uncle, you know, they know people in the industry. So when they're at the weekend on a golf course, they're getting all of this information. But people that don't have that exposure, don't have that access, they don't. So in a hybrid world, actually, it's much worse for them, because they don't get to have those informal conversations. So what it requires organizations to do is be much more intentional. So I'm always putting pressure on our company. Let's demystify things. You know, so even one of the things that we've done is we started a career podcast. Well, we're going to talk about the things. We're going to talk about sponsorship. We're going to break it down what it is. How do you identify sponsor? How do you get sponsorship? We're going to talk about how to maximize a mentoring program, because so, like I said before, it's about coming alongside the individuals. And I think if you are intentional, you will get good engagement in a virtual world, and people will show up. And when you're now trying to get them into the office, it's now with a purpose, and they're more likely to show up and want to be there, because they feel that actually the organization is genuinely trying to come alongside me in my journey and help me to succeed in the world of work. So I hope that kind of makes sense, but you just need a lot of intentionality.
Oh God, we really don't want to have to bring this to an end, but we do. And I just want to say, this has been such an interesting conversation. If you can see me and Maame's sheets, we've literally scribbled down so many notes, and I'm sure that the attendees have learned so much. So just want to say a huge thank you to Abisola, Sue, and Tracey. There were amazing points. Honestly, we've learned so much, and I'm sure, as you can see, there were so many questions which we weren't able to answer all of them, but we will email them to all three of you. And you can reach out to Sue and Tracey on LinkedIn. You can reach out to Abisola Barber on abisolabarber.com on her website. If you have further questions and you'd like to hear a bit more about their experiences. But again, thank you all to all the speakers, and thank you to all the attendees. And in regards to DANOS as well, we do have a DE&I report that we produce every year, and basically it highlights the internal and external initiatives that we do. It can be helpful for people if they want to see any more ideas of what they can be doing at their firm. We're more than happy to share with you. Just reach out to me and Maame. Also, if you're looking to hire or you're looking for a role within risk, compliance, legal, or ESG, again, don't hesitate to reach out to me and Maame. We can put you in contact with the appropriate people. But again, it was great to see all of you. We hope to see you again next year on our next webinar. But again, hope you all took something away. Thank you very much, everyone.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a good evening.